We are joined here today with Matt. Matt and I have actually had a previous conversation, and honestly, too, when talking with him for a short amount of time, I could tell that right away he was going to be probably a pretty good fit for a podcast style conversation, just because of not only his energy, but all the great stuff that he was saying. And so, not only for myself, but more so for the audience, Matt, do you mind sharing a little bit more about your journey into the field of mental performance? And ultimately too, what sparked that initial interest?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on the podcast as well. So, for myself, this has been a journey of a lot of discovery about what I've wanted to do. I definitely was someone who has always played sports, always was really competitive. And when it came to trying to decide what I actually wanted to do, I didn't know right away. And that's pretty common for someone when they're 16, 17, 18 years old. And I'm fortunate that that time that I took to be able to figure out what I actually wanted to do and find some core principles of what I like, which is listening, hearing people's stories, and really helping people, fostered a lot of key values for myself to be able to guide of what I wanted to do. I started thinking it was more of psychology, clinical mental health. As I did more discovery, I found sports psychology, athletic counseling, mental performance, and that just combined those two, I'm going to say, loves of sport as well as helping other people and listening to people's stories. So I was able to go do my undergrad in psychology and then be able to go for my master's at Springfield College in Massachusetts. And within that, the more I've dove into the field and now been actually working in it for over 5 years now, it's really just showed me how fortunate I am that I did take that time. You see a lot of people, they don't like what they do. They struggle, work is a drag of going through and everything. And to be able to go and find something that I'm really passionate about, as well as just applies to everything in my life and everyone's life, really helps kind of do it every single day. And I think that's the big part with mental performance that people sometimes overlook, is that they think it's just for a sport or one particular thing, but it really transcends to everything in life. What we do in life as a performance, we're going to be having thoughts and feelings and emotions, and how we're able to use those tools plays a massive role in everything. So that's why I think the more I've dove into this field, the more I've loved it even more, because I see the broad scope of application in everything.
Yeah, and honestly, too, a lot of the individuals who I talk with in this space say a lot of, similar things, right? They always kind of get into it from kind of that sports background, and then they're like, holy cow, I can actually see this being transitioned now into other performers, other, whether it's, business, the military population, police, firemen, all that other stuff like that. They're like, there's such a broader use that, I might even not have imagined that's even out there. But for myself too, when I was first learning about this and even first got introduced to sports psychology, mental performance, mental health, there's a lot of misconceptions, especially for being, a male student athlete at the time. And a lot of it came from, hey, I don't want to be seen as kind of that weak, vulnerable guy, or, maybe getting that negative reaction or judgment, whether that's from, teammates, coaches, friends, family, all that type of stuff. But for you, Matt, and for some of the athletes who you've worked with, what are some common misconceptions that you really see people having about mental performance? And ultimately, too, how do you address those?
It's tough because it still gets tied into the, like you said, mental. So people think psychology, they think of clinical mental health, and it still does have that stigma of, well, I should only do that if something's wrong with me or something's not happening the way it should. And then there's a lot of barriers within that, because first you have to identify it yourself, that what's going on. Then you have to go and be like, am I willing to talk to someone about that? And then it's okay, now I'm talking with them. Am I comfortable now being able to more look internally of what's going on? And there's a lot of things that go into that. And so I'd say that's one of the big misconceptions, that there has to be something wrong. We have to also look at it as, hey, like, we can use these tools as a way to actually enhance performance. There's a reason why jobs are called enhancement psychologists or enhancement like performers, because it's to help your performance, whether you're doing great or you're struggling. It sometimes just gets easier when things aren't going well, for someone to label it as, hey, that's a mental issue they're having, like, go talk to someone. And within that, it's also to break that stigma even more, is like everything we do, like I said previously, Like our mind plays a role with it. So if we can learn how it operates, why it thinks in certain ways or does certain things, it's going to help us in so many areas of life. And I think that's the piece that you really want to focus on when trying to tell someone to get into these is, hey, even if you're doing really well in your sport or in your job or school, hey, these are now things to assist you with that because yes, you do a lot of great things. And now we want to optimize those routines or habits to make them even better, even if you are a great performer in whatever domain you're in. Another misconception a lot of people have is the thought that it's going to be a quick fix or there's going to be told what to do. And I think that's really difficult because what makes the sessions that I have and that people in mental performance or even counseling have is the collaboration process, which is so, so important because you already have a lot of people telling you what to do or how to do it and kind of giving you orders. And most likely you don't like that. So I always strive not to be another person that's just telling you what to do, but working together at coming up with a solution because then you're much more likely to actually go and act on it and do it and use the skills than if I just told you, hey, breathe, have some positive self talk, and be positive with yourself, or do some relaxation techniques or like meditation, right? Like you can find all of these answers online very easily, but what makes the session so much more impactful is if you're an active participant. I don't want to be talking at you. I want you to be doing work as well. And then it's also we're personalizing things so you have an understanding of what's going on. I have a better understanding. And then we can now collaborate together to have the best plan forward that's much more personalized to things you already do super well.
Right. And that's like too, I mean, on the athletic side, that's almost like, hey, if you're going to show up to practice, obviously you're going to be there to take the reps and to actually participate. You're not there to just stand around and watch everybody else go about it and have your coach talk to you about, everything that's happening out there. That's how you get better day in and day out is taking those reps and actively working on that and putting that into, not only in your perspective, but within those day-to-day routines, whether it's specifically on game day or just, multiple days in the week. But I know for myself, when I was in school, a really big mental hurdle that I had to kind of work on myself was just performance anxiety in general. I mean, I could, name off countless times, whether it was before a big practice, a big game, you name it, where I could feel myself starting to get pretty anxious before, walking from that last class of the day right over to the locker room to get changed and ready for that big event. It seemed like the hardest thing to do, and I could feel myself getting all tense, all worked up on the outside. Sure, to coaches or to teammates, yeah, it seems like I'm probably calm, cool, collected, but on the inside, my mind's going a mile a minute type of thing, and I just couldn't, I couldn't really do anything about it, for lack of better terms. But for you, Matt, and for the athletes that you work with, again, I get that everyone is so uniquely different in that sense. But what are some common mental hurdles that the athletes who you work with typically face? And ultimately, too, how do you help them overcome those challenges?
Yeah, it's tough. Like you said, it is individual, but there are a lot of key principles that go into helping athletes and things that are common amongst a lot of them. So for myself, I always try and work what I say from like an inside out perspective with them, where I want to have them understand like they do a lot of stuff really well. Like they've gotten to this point for a reason. And now we want to use what they do on a consistent basis and have them notice that. I think a lot of times people think a lot about what they have to work on or what they don't do well. So I want to get an understanding of like, hey, what does your ideal performance look like? And if I can get them to understand and really break that down, not like, oh, I get a lot of hits or I score a lot of points, but like what internally is going on that helps me perform at my best. And if I can help them find that, that's a big piece at the beginning part of being able to be more confident, not as anxious, because we're always going to go back to that ideal performance. If you don't know what your ideal is, you can't get there. You can't strive for it. It's like trying to drive somewhere without an actual destination. So if I can have you understand what that is, then we're going to use that. We're going to create different things to focus on that are part of your ideal. And then now when other things come up, whether it's distractions, whether it's anxiety, whether it's doubt in yourself, now we can manage those or address those, but we're always going to end with getting it back to like, how does this compare to your ideal or your ideal performance? Because if that brings us back, like I said, to a center point, and we'll use strategies to get back to it. But ultimately, we have to get back to something. So that's like always a key early part of my sessions is talk to me about what goes well for you and what that looks like. And I think that plays a big role to give them some confidence to see how much they do and also a better understanding of what it takes to do well for themselves because sometimes they know it, but they don't actually recognize it that often.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know too, even talking with a lot of the athletes, now, especially at the collegiate level, two of the things that they really mention is kind of being, big weighing factors on them nowadays are comparison, number one, which a lot of it is due to, just social media in general, but also just the pressure to, perform at the highest level and kind of maintain that performance. If they, for instance, it's easier for me to relate to baseball than any other sport just because that's what I played, but it's one of those things, right? Where, hey, you have a game where you go 4 for 4 and it's, probably the, best game you've had the entire season. Well, that next game, coaches, teammates are pretty much expecting that same performance to happen regardless. And we know in baseball that you can fail 7 out of 10 times and still be a pretty darn good hitter. So, with that being said, though, what are some good strategies to really try to help deal with some of those pressures, deal with also that comparison nowadays with social media being so prevalent in our, just days, right? It's all over our phone. It's all about what we do. People post about their accomplishments, but never about maybe some of those low lights or some of the other things that they're dealing with. How can athletes kind of go about, dealing with both those realms?
Yeah. So with you use the word of like expectation, which is something that I talk to a lot of athletes about, just because we're in our minds when we're trying to get better, we tend to go to the future a lot of what we want to have happen, how we want things to look. And that creates a lot of anxiety, right? Because anxiety also lives in the future. So when we try and craft this perfect future of, hey, if I do these 5 things, I hope this happens, I commit to a college or play professionally, or maybe it's just starting on your high school team. It creates some motivation in the short term, but it also can create a lot of pressure. Say it doesn't go the way you expect it to. And that's where expectations become a little bit dangerous because there's one outcome that actually becomes feasible and everything else becomes like a failure, right? If you expect to get a hit and you don't get a hit, well, you failed to that expectation where you might have hit the ball extremely hard and it was caught, right? So we're not viewing it on a fair playing field. There's endless possibilities, but only one thing that can actually achieve it. Expectations also take away, I say, like the joy of it because now, say you do get that hit, right? You expected to do that, and now it's not as great. But if you got out, you have a much bigger reaction because you expected to get the hit. So that's where it creates that, and it always becomes more perfect in your mind. So the analogy I use for expectations is like they're like vacations. If you go and you have a trip plan, it's at a great outdoor location or a great location, and you have all these plans of what it's going to be. You've looked at photos of other people's trips to see what they did. You see the landscape, you have all these big thoughts of it. It doesn't match. You might do all of those things, but it doesn't match the image you had in your head or the feeling you had in your head. And that's where it becomes then it's like, okay, now there's still a letdown, even if you did everything you wanted. So that's where we have to be careful of the expectations we make because now it's like a law or a rule we're setting for ourselves. And it becomes more definitive. Like I have to now get a hit or I have to perform well. So that then causes some of the pressure, the comparison, the anxiety is getting so far into the future that we're not actually just doing the actions that we need to, which is getting back to the present, which is a big piece as to what causes a lot that's going on. Like you mentioned, comparison, stress, pressure, anxiety is what we kind of put on ourselves.
Yeah, I really like that analogy just as far as how you laid that out, because I think too that that's just the perfect example of it, right? When we have that one ultimate goal to achieve, anything else is considered a pretty much a failure in our minds as performers. And so, yeah, no, it's a tough kind of give and take relationship there with, those goals, but also to, those expectations that we've set on ourselves. Yeah, it's tough. But one of the things too that I've noticed over just my time in general, obviously I'm a few years now removed from college myself and from being a student athlete. And back then it seemed like sports psychology, mental performance was just starting to be talked about a little bit more, more so on the professional side of things, right? Some athletes kind of talking about their journey, their struggles, what they were kind of dealing with, really trying to bring light to the situation to help out other athletes. And it seems like more and more are following suit, right? And it's kind of starting to trickle down from, professionals down in the college scene, high school, even, middle school, you name it. It's great to see, right? I'm a big fan of it. I think that there's, such a need for support for, every athlete out there. I think it's a great thing. But for you, Matt, how do you see kind of not only the role of like a mental performance coach, but just kind of the mental performance industry really evolving over the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to, just enhancements in the industry, coaches, teams, organizations, players becoming more adapt to saying, hey, you know what, I actually need this, right? Like this is going to help me at the end of the day. And it's a skill that I need to, actually evolve on and work on, just like in the weight room, just like at practice. How do you see that evolving over the coming years?
I think it's just going to continue to grow and expand pretty and be almost commonplace in a lot of sports and industries. People are now starting to see the benefits of it. So you have, like you said, in the professional leagues, every baseball team in the MLB has one from the majors to the minors. Maybe not to every affiliate, but they have at least a team of them. I know like the NHL just passed it's not a law, but a rule that like every team have like clinical mental health and like something in that capacity for not just the NHL teams, but also the AHL teams that they are affiliated with. So you're seeing this expansion of it being much more commonplace, like you said. And I've heard people in the field say like it's almost following the same trajectory as like the strength and conditioning or like the exercise side of it's like 10 or 15 years behind that. I hear some of the older players that were in the MLB talk about or that are retired now of, hey, in the beginning of my career, we didn't focus too much on lifting. And they're, I mean, people that I grew up watching, and that was 10 years ago. And they said like we didn't really focus too much on lifting. And if we did, it was not as dedicated and consistent. Where now it's integrated everywhere in the game. And now kind of that mental wave is coming in of like, hey, you have the physical, you have your pitching coaches, your trackmans, or your technical coaches. And now it's like, hey, the mental side's kind of following that lead, but now just a little bit delayed or a little bit behind in terms of the development. So I think in these coming years, it's just going to become more and more prevalent in not just sports, but also just in companies, in schools, in so many ways. We have such a need to understand what's going on mentally, and we also unfortunately see a lot of problems going on with kids down to the high school level, middle school level of anxieties and depressions and all of that. And that might be more clinical, but still, if we can learn more about what's happening and just a little bit of education, it can go a long way. So I think you said like companies are having them, like your top companies of your Googles and Apples, like they have these people in there because they know to be a leader in the industry, in the field, like they need their people performing at their best. And how do we do that? We incorporate things that are physical, technical, mental, whatever other areas, nutritional, sleep. Like there's so many realms, and the more to a high performer it goes, the more the mental side is going to be prevalent. That's kind of needed for everything.
I appreciate the fact too that you acknowledge kind of, even on like the exercise side of it, right? Where there's almost this lag period of time where, hey, it really starts to, evolve. And now it seems like a super mainstream thing where if I said, hey, back a couple of years when I was in school, if I said that we didn't have, a weight room with a weight training coach and we weren't, lifting weights, multiple times a week, someone would probably be shocked hearing that. But if I go on the other side of the spectrum and I said, hey, you know what? We didn't work with a mental performance coach, didn't have a sports psychologist on campus, and really didn't have any resources for that. Depending on who you talk to, it's probably like, well, okay, like, so what type of thing. At least you had a weight room. At least you had a good coaching staff, and hopefully you made the most with what you had. But Yeah, to your point though, I really agree with that. I think that you're going to start seeing it more in different realms as well. To your point, right? Those companies, school settings, not just the athletic space, and just seeing how we can help out those individuals, those people who really want to perform at their best, but also the individuals too who are struggling in other facets as well. But and this question too is more so for people who are trying to break into the field, right? Whether it's somebody in high school, somebody in college who might be kind of, taking a few intro classes and trying to really figure out what they want to, go into kind of post college into an actual career. But for you, Matt, what advice would you give to an aspiring mental performance coach who's actually pretty interested in getting into this field later on down in their career?
Yeah, I think the roadmap's starting to become a lot more clear of how to do that and how to get involved. I would say a lot of people are getting into the field. I would say the job market of it hasn't caught up with the volume of people entering for sure. And that's not saying there's not opportunities to be able to create a position, but there are not like too many ready to walk into the job descriptions there. It's laid out for you, and now you just execute positions available. Yes, the military is the highest employer of mental performance. So like that is an avenue that has that. MLB teams, professional teams do have that. They also though want more experience. So you have to find that experience in some capacity, whether it's professional, whether it's with colleges. So I think that's where it's be ready to kind of put in the work and build off of your connections of, hey, where do I think this can be very helpful for a company, or it's starting your own thing. So it's being able to understand like there's going to be a lot of legwork up front, at least at the time being, of you're going to try out a lot of things. You're probably going to not do it perfectly. There's going to be mistakes. There's things that fall flat on your face. And that's just how it is. It's all the learning process of it, which makes you tap into a lot of things you then learned in school and actually tell the people you work with of that progress is going to take time. You're going to fail. That's okay. Constantly learn because yeah, like everyone can use a mental performance coach or sports psychologist. Every company, every school, everything. Now you have to be able to go though and provide value of why that is, how it can help them, and if it's a company, kind of show them how it could be profitable for them. So it's also a big thing of learning how to market yourself is something that at least in my schooling never really learned, and has been a big learning curve of how to market, how to talk to people, how to make sales pitches of things is really, really important because even if you know your stuff really well, but you can't present it to someone else, that's your audience, which becomes really important because they have to also buy into it. So I would say be ready to put in a lot of work to summarize, like put in a lot of like legwork up front and like really be passionate about it because it's not just going to be handed. And then also learn that marketing sales side of how to do that properly because that's going to really help take off, whether that's selling it to a company, to the people you work with, or whatever domain you're in, because you have to be able to have other people want to do it and buy into it as well.
Right. And I think to that point, communication is such a big thing, being able to communicate in a, properly, right? How to break it down into saying, hey, here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to help out your population, the athletes, but here's also too how I can sell myself on XYZ organization, a team, an individual. And for everybody listening too, I think that Matt does a great job of that, right? He gets right to the point about it, but he also too, explains with reasoning as far as how he's there to support XYZ athlete, individual, you name it. For everybody down below too, who's whether they're aspiring to become a mental performance coach one day or even an athlete, we're going to provide Matthew's socials down below so that you guys can network and connect with him. Again, I know that networking and connecting is such a big and important part within the mental performance community in general, just because there's such a big knowledge basis there, but also it's just great when people come together in that community environment and just help out each other and kind of, talk about best practices, what's worked well, what hasn't, where they see opportunities, things of that nature. But with that being said, guys, I can't thank Matt enough for his time today. He was an absolute rock star with us, sharing a wealth of knowledge. So hopefully, too, we can get another conversation with him in the future. Keep picking his brain a little bit more each time. But this was awesome to get to know him a little bit more and a little bit about his background and the athletes who he works with. So thank you, Matt, for your time. I really do appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week.